and welcome to Dressmaking, amore. I'm so excited to show you today how to sew this understated but such a sophisticated ruched asymmetric dress. If you're looking for a simple yet graceful and elegant dress, this one is perfect for you. The beautiful slanted off-shoulder neckline asymmetrically lies on your pretty décolletage, and the key point of this dress is the lovely little gathering detail on the left side of the waistline that spreads out into the flared skirt. Of course, we'll be using my Holly Dress PDF sewing pattern, so to follow along, get yours at the link below in the description. And here are the materials that you'll need. Please refer to your instructional booklet that comes with your pattern to choose your right size and print and assemble the pattern perfectly, as well as follow the cutting instructions. And all the steps for the whole sewing process of this dress are in there. I'm using an ITY fabric here. It's just something I had on hand, but you do want to use a stretch knit fabric that has elastane, something like a French terry, ponte de Roma, brushed poly fabric, or a knit velvet. Our pattern pieces are the right back skirt, front lining, and the front. Now, some pieces of this pattern are to be cut in one fabric layer, laying right side up, and other pieces are to be cut in a mirrored style because we'll be using them as lining. So be careful while cutting. Please refer to the instructions and the layout technical illustration on pages 8 and 9 of your booklet. And of course, make sure to mark the wrong side of all of your pieces so you won't get confused later on. Okay, let's get to sewing. Our first task is to pin and sew the bust darts of our lining at the wrong side of the fabric. Sew them using either a straight stitch or a zigzag, choosing what works best for your fabric. Press them down towards the waistline. Now place the front and the corresponding back, right sides together, and sew and press the shoulder seams. I'm using a light colored thread here so it's more visible for you. And then pin and sew the center back seam. The seam allowances here are 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch, which is good for both a regular machine and a serger. For this particular fabric, I like sewing on the machine first and then moving to a serger. Now press the seam using a wooden tailor's clapper to cool the seam down and take away any moisture. Taking the front piece of the shell, meaning the outside of the dress, and on the wrong side of the fabric, pin and sew the bust darts in the same way as we did with the lining. I hope you can see with the white thread that I'm using, but I like to sew alongside the edge of the fold at the very point of the dart and then flare out towards the notch. In this way, I'm avoiding a pointy dart. And at the ends, you can tie knots if you prefer. Press your darts. And now you can see this corner sticking out. We need to true this side, meaning even it out. Okay, now with the front laying right side up, at the left side with the straight sleeve, we have notches. Place a pin to mark the top notch, then we have the waistline notch, and 2 more notches below. One notch is for the ending of the gathering, which I'll mark, and the second is for the hip line. So we want to place a gathering stitch from the 2 marked notches. Start about 1 cm or 1/2 inch before the first notch and sew alongside the side seam with the length of the stitch being about 5 to 6 mm. Now sew down to our second mark, going farther again by about 1 cm or 1/2 inch. This is how the gathering looks. Once we sewed the gathering stitch, we need to sew the shoulder seams and the neckline. So place the front and the corresponding back piece right sides together, pin and sew the shoulder seams. We also want to pin the 2 back pieces right sides together and sew the center back seam. And press all of the seams. The next step is the neckline. Place the shell and the lining of the dress right sides together, matching the center back seams and the shoulder seams, and pin. I like to use a clear elastic for the neckline, which is thin yet stretchy, and this will help hold the shape of the neckline and prevent it from stretching out too much as we wear the dress. Place the clear elastic right along the edge, and don't stretch the elastic or the neckline while sewing. After that, we understitch the seam allowances, turning the dress to the right side and the seam allowances of the neckline towards the lining. And of course, press the neckline. Then to sew the armholes, first we will pin at the shoulder seams, making sure that everything is even and laying nicely, and then true the edges of the armholes, cutting off just those few millimeters. And do the same to the other side. Now here we're going to do something called the burrito technique. Open up one side of the dress so it's laying right side up, then take the other side of the sleeve and place it in the middle. Take the bottom layer and wrap it up over the middle. Let me show you again. This is our dress laying right side up with the lining underneath. Take the top half and roll it all the way down like this. Now we have here two edges, the main layer and the lining. We need to join them, so place this top layer over the rolled side and the bottom underneath the rolled side. Join them and pin the corners, and do the same to the other side, and again the same to the middle. Pin the armhole all along, pushing the rolled piece inside away from the edge. I have a separate tutorial specifically about this burrito technique, and it's linked below in the description if you'd like a more dedicated explanation. We'll sew using a serger or a narrow zigzag stitch, then turn out the armhole to the right side, press the seam, cooling it down as well. So one armhole is done, and in the same way, sew the other armhole. On the skirt back, we have notches at the side and multiple notch marks to mark the center back seam. So pin the center back seam right sides together, matching the marks, and sew the center back seam and press. Let's check the waistline at the center back of the bodice. Take the back shell and the lining and lay it out with the wrong side facing you, and check if you need to true this bottom edge. Now pin the waistline together, and you can stay stitched now or after you pin the skirt to this. Then place the skirt and back bodice right sides together and pin along the waistline. Make sure your seam is on the wrong side of the dress here. Sew the waistline seam from the skirt side together with clear elastic, just like we did at the neckline. You can see that the elastic is inside the serger seam here. Now press the seam towards the skirt. If you want, you can serge the bottom edge of the bodice front lining, or leave it raw if your fabric doesn't unravel. Moving on to the right side seam, with the front lining away, pin the side seams only of the front shell, matching the waist and hip notches. Then pin all the way down the skirt. Now at the front left side, we're going to pin the side seam at the waistline notches, and then gather the fabric between these notches so that we match the back side seam marks. Pin in place. After our shell side seam is pinned, we can flip over the lining front to the back, pulling it over the armhole at the side seam like this, so that our back is in between the shell front and the lining front. Pin the side seam just like this, and repeat to the other side. Sew the side seam. Since there's a lot of layers, I'm choosing first to sew on the sewing machine and then continue to the serger. Now that we sewed the side seam, we can turn the dress out, clean the gathering stitch, and press the side seam. For the hem of the dress, you can leave the raw edges if your fabric doesn't unravel, or use a rolled seam or double fold and sew. And of course, giving your entire garment a finishing press like always, we are done with our elegant holly dress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this inspires you to sew this lovely piece yourself. I know you'll love it. You can get the PDF downloadable sewing pattern that I used below at the link in the description of this video, and happy sewing!